The Iliad by Homer, Book 23. While the Trojans lamented throughout the city, the Greeks came to their beachhead camp on the Hellespont and dispersed, each man to his own ship. But Achilles did not dismiss the Myrmidons. He addressed his troops, men who lived for war. Myrmidons, I know you love your horses, but before we unhitch them from the chariots, let us all stay in armor and drive up close and weep for Patroclus. We owe it to the dead. After we've indulged in grief and sorrow, we can loosen our horses and eat together. He spoke and led them in their lamentation. 3 times they drove their horses round the corpse, wailing as they went. Thetis was with them, and she honed their desire for grief. The sand was wet, and the warriors' armor wet with tears. They missed him. God, how he could fight! Achilles' voice rose through their choking sobbing as he placed his man-slaying hands on his friend's breast. I hail you, Patroclus, even in Hades. I am fulfilling all that I promised before, to drag Hector here and feed him raw to the dogs, and to cut the throats of 12 fine Trojan boys before your pyre, in my rage at your murder. He spoke, and treated glorious Hector foully, stretching him out in the dust before the bier of Menelaus' son. The men took off their armor, bronze gleaming in the dusk, and unhitched their whinnying horses, and sat down by the ships of Aeacus' swift grandson, too many to count. And he made a funeral feast to satisfy their hearts. Many sleek bulls bellowed beneath the knife as they were slaughtered, many sheep, bleating goats, and white-tusked boars rich with fat were skewered to roast over the fire's flame. The ground around the corpse ran cup-deep with blood. The other Greek leaders had come for Achilles, and were now escorting him to Agamemnon. It had not been easy to convince him to come. His heart raged for his friend. When they reached Agamemnon's hut, they ordered the heralds to put a cauldron on the fire, hoping to persuade Achilles to bathe and wash off the gore. He refused outright, and swore this oath. By Zeus on high, there will not be any washing of my head until I have laid Patroclus on the fire, and heaped his barrow, and shorn my hair, for never will I grieve like this again, while I am among the living. Now let's force ourselves to eat this feast. But at the break of dawn, Agamemnon, order your men to bring wood and make ready all that is fit for a dead man to have when he goes beneath the murky gloom, so that the fire may burn him quickly out of sight. And the men return to what they have to do. He spoke, they listened, and they did as he said. They prepared a meal, and each man feasted. And when they all had enough of food and drink, they went to their huts and took their rest. But the son of Peleus lay groaning heavily among his Myrmidons on the open beach, where the waves crashed and seethed. When sleep finally took him, unknotting his heart and enveloping his shining limbs, so fatigued from chasing Hector to windy Ilion, Patroclus' sad spirit came, with his same form and with his beautiful eyes, and his voice, and wearing the same clothes. He stood above Achilles' head, and said to him, You're asleep and have forgotten me, Achilles. You never neglected me when I was alive, but now when I am dead, bury me quickly, so I may pass through Hades' gates. The spirits keep me at a distance, the phantoms of men outworn, and will not yet allow me to join them beyond the river. I wander aimlessly through Hades' wide-doored house, and give me your hand, for never again will I come back from Hades, once you burn me in my share of fire. Never more in life shall we sit apart from our comrades and talk. The fate I was born to has swallowed me, and it is your destiny, though you are like the gods, Achilles, to die beneath the wall of Troy. And one more thing, Achilles, do not lay my bones apart from yours, but let them lie together, just as we were reared together in your house, after Menelaus brought me, still just a boy, from Opeus to your land because I had killed Amphidamas' son on that day we played dice, and I foolishly became angry. I didn't mean to. Peleus took me into his house then and reared me with kindness, and he named me your comrade. So let one coffer enfold the bones of us both, the two-handled gold one your mother gave you. And Achilles answered him, saying, Why have you come to me here, dear heart, with all these instructions? I promise you I will do everything just as you ask. But come closer, let us give in to grief, however briefly, in each other's arms. Saying this, Achilles reached out with his hands, but could not touch him. His spirit vanished like smoke, gone under the earth, with a last shrill cry. Awestruck, Achilles leapt up, clapping his palms together, and said, lamenting, Ah! So there is something in death's house, a phantom spirit, although not in a body. All night long poor Patroclus' spirit stood over me, weeping and wailing, and giving me detailed instructions about everything. He looked so like himself. His words aroused in them a longing for grief, and they were still wailing around the corpse when dawn's roselight touched them. Then Lord Agamemnon sent out from all over the camp a contingent of mules and men to gather wood, putting a good man in charge, Meriones, Idomeneus' henchman. The men went out with axes and ropes, and the mules before them, upward, downward, sideways and slantwise, until they came to the spurs of spring-dotted Ida. There they set to work felling high-crowned oaks with bronze axes. The trees kept crashing down. They split the trunks and bound them together behind the mules, who tore up the ground. As they tramped through underbrush toward the plain, Meriones ordered the whole crew of woodcutters to carry back logs, and they cast them down on the shore in order, where Achilles planned a great mound for Patroclus and for himself. When they had laid out an immense amount of wood, the crowd sat down and waited. Then Achilles ordered the Myrmidons to put on their armor and yoke the horses to the chariots. They armed and mounted, charioteers and warriors both, and the chariots rolled out, with foot soldiers following behind in an endless cloud. In the middle his comrades bore Patroclus, covering his body as if with a garment. With hair they sheared off and cast upon it. Behind them Achilles cradled his head, grieving for the peerless friend he was sending to Hades. When they came to the place Achilles had told them, they put the body down and quickly heaped up enough wood and plenty. Then Achilles, acting on impulse, stood apart from the pyre and sheared off his hair, the tawny hair he had been growing long for the river Spercheius. Brooding, he turned toward the open sea, the water glinting like wine, and said, Spercheius, my father Peleus vowed in vain that when I had come home to my native land, I would shear my hair for you, and sacrifice bulls by the 150 rams unblemished into your springs, where your precinct is, and your smoking altar. An old man's prayer, which you did not fulfill, since I will never return home to my native land. I would give to the hero Patroclus this lock to bear with him. and he placed it in his beloved friend's hands. This started them all weeping, and the sun would have set on their lamentation, had not Achilles said to Agamemnon, "Son of Atreus, you have the widest command. These men can mourn all they want, but for now disperse them from the pyre, and have them prepare their dinner. Those of us who are closest to the dead will do everything here, and we would have all the leaders stay too." The warlord Agamemnon heard him, and dismissed the troops to the ships. The funeral party stayed and heaped up wood, building a pyre 100 feet on each side, and with heavy hearts they set the corpse on top. Then they flayed many fine sheep and oxen, and laid them dressed out before the pyre. Achilles gathered the fat from them all, and enfolded the body from head to foot, then heaped around it the flayed carcasses. Next he set amphoras of honey and oil against the bier, and with heavy groans quickly cast on the pyre 4 high-necked horses. 9 dogs once fed under the prince's table. Achilles cut the throats of 2 and cast them on. And 12 Trojans also, sons from good families, slashing them with bronze in a vengeful spirit. Then he kindled the fire and let its iron will rage. With a groan he called his beloved friend's name. "Hear me, Patroclus, even from Hades. All that I promised you I am completing now. 12 Trojans, sons of good families. The fire consumes with you. Hector, though, I will not give to the fire to eat, but to dogs." Thus went his threat, but no dogs would eat Hector. Aphrodite kept the dogs from his corpse, by day and by night, and she anointed him with ambrosial oil of rose, so that when Achilles dragged his body, it would not be torn. And Phoebus Apollo drew a dark blue cloud from the sky to the plain, covering the spot where the body lay, so that the sun's heat would not shrivel the flesh on his bones. But Patroclus's pyre would not kindle. Achilles thought of something else to try. Standing apart from the pyre, he prayed to the north wind and west wind, promising fine offerings, pouring libations from a gold cup, and earnestly beseeching them to come and blow, so the wood would kindle and the body burn. Iris heard his prayer, and was off to the winds with the message. They were all in the house of the brisk west wind, eating a banquet, and Iris swooped to a stop on the stone threshold when they saw her there. They all whooshed up, and each wind invited her to sit next to him. But she refused to eat, and made this speech. "No seat for me. I'm off to ocean's streams, to the Ethiopians. They are offering sacrifices to the immortals, and I want to get my share. But Achilles is praying for the winds to come, the north wind and the howling west, and he is offering fine offerings, promising them, if you will raise the fire on Patroclus's pyre, for whom all the Achaeans are groaning aloud." She spoke and was gone, and the winds rose with an eerie noise, driving clouds behind them. They reached the sea quickly, and the waves swelled under their whistling blast. When they came to Troy, they fell on the pyre, and the flames roared to life. The whole night long the shrill winds blew steadily on the funeral pyre, and all the long night Achilles drew wine from a golden bowl and poured it out over from a 2-handled cup, wetting the earth, ever summoning the spirit of forlorn Patroclus. A father wails for his son as he burns his bones. a son newly wed, a son whose death has brought his parents inconsolable grief. Achilles wailed for his friend as he burned his bones, moving slowly about the pyre, groaning heavily. The morning star rose, speaking light to the earth, and dawn opened over the sea like a crocus. The flames died down and the fire subsided. The winds left and returned to their home over the Thracian sea, and it moaned beneath them. Then the son of Peleus left the pyre, and lay down exhausted. He was soon asleep, but the men with Agamemnon gathered around, and the sound of their tramping woke him. He sat up and spoke to them, saying, "Son of Atreus and princes of Greece, first quench the funeral fire with wine wherever it burned. Then gather the bones of Patroclus, son of Menelaus. Pick them out carefully. They are easily recognized, for he lay in the middle, while the others burned off to the sides, men and horses jumbled. Then let us wrap the bones in fat and keep them in a golden bowl, until I am hidden in Hades. You need not labor over a huge barrow for him, but only what is seemly. Later the Achaeans can build it broad and high, all of you still left amid our thwarted ships when I am gone." Thus Peleus' swift son, and they obeyed him. First they doused the pyre with wine, wherever it had burned, and the embers were thick. Then they gathered the bones of their gentle comrade into a golden bowl, wrapping them twice in fat. And they placed the bowl in the hut, and covered it with a soft linen cloth. Then they traced a circle for a mound, and laid a foundation around the pyre, and piled up earth to form a tumulus over it. Then they started to go back, but Achilles kept all the people there, and had them sit down. Then he brought prizes from his ship, cauldrons, tripods, horses, mules, oxen, silken-waisted women, and gray iron. First he set out prizes for the chariot race, a woman whose work was immaculate, and a 22-gallon tripod with handles for first place. For second place, a mare, 6 years old, unbroken, pregnant with a mule foal. For third place, a beautiful cauldron, unfired, holding 4 gallons, still pristine white. For fourth place, 2 bars of gold. For fifth, a 2-handled bowl, unfired. He put out these prizes, then stood up and said, "Son of Atreus and Greek heroes all, these prizes await the charioteers. If our games were in someone else's honor, I would win first prize hands down, for you know how superior my horses are. Immortal, in fact, a gift from Poseidon, to my father Peleus, who gave them to me. But I will sit this one out, and my horses too, who have lost the glorious, brave charioteer who was so kind to them, who would often rub down their coats with soft olive oil after bathing them with bright water. It is for him the 2 of them now stand in grief, their manes trailing on the ground, standing there in sorrow. But this is the call for any other Achaean who trusts his horses and jaunted chariot." The charioteers responded quickly. Eumelus was first up, Admetus' son, a prince and a fine horseman, followed by Diomedes, who yoked up the horse of Tros, which he had taken from Aeneas, though Apollo saved the man. Atreus' son, Menelaus, was next, yoking up a fast team, Agamemnon's mare, Aethe, and his own horse, Podargus. The mare had been given to Agamemnon by Echepolis, Anchises' son, as a bribe, so he wouldn't have to go to windy Ilion, but could stay at home and enjoy the wealth Zeus had given him in spacious Sicyon. The mare, at any rate, was eager to race. Antilochus was the fourth entry, Nestor's son. His fleet, combed horses were bred in Pylos, and as Antilochus was yoking them, his noble father came up to give him advice, well meant, but his son already understood. Antilochus, young as you are, Zeus and Poseidon have taught you all there is to know about horses. There is no need for me to teach you what you already know, how to round a turn and so forth. However, your horses are the slowest in the race, and that spells trouble. But if the others' horses are faster, that doesn't mean they know more than you, or are better strategists. Well then, my boy, develop your strategy so that prize in games don't elude your grasp. Strategy makes a better woodcutter than strength. Strategy keeps a pilot's ship on course when crosswinds blow it over the wine-blue sea. And strategy wins races for charioteers. One type of driver trusts his horses and car and swerves mindlessly this way and that, all over the course without reining his horses. But a man who knows how to win with lesser horses keeps his eye on the post and cuts the turns close, and from the start keeps tension on the reins with a firm hand as he watches the leader. Now here's a sign you can't possibly miss. A dry stump stands about a fathom high, either oak or pine, something rain won't rot, with two white stones set close on each side, where the smooth stretches of the course converge, either the grave marker of a man long dead, or the goal of a race in an earlier age. Achilles has made this his turning post. Crowd it when you drive your horses by, leaning gently to their left in your leather rig, as you urge your right horse on and give him rein. Have your left horse crimp the turning post, so close that the hub of your well-made wheel seems to scrape its edge. But don't touch the stone or you'll wreck your chariot and injure your team, a humiliation for you which the others would love. So keep your wits about you, my boy. If you drive past the rest at the turning post, no one will catch you or pass you in a sprint, not even if Arion were following your heel. Adrastus's swift horse from a breed divine, or one of Laomedon's excellent local stock. Thus Nestor, son of Neleus, who then sat down, having explained to his dear son every last detail. Meriones was the fifth to enter the race. They mounted their chariots and cast in their lots. Achilles shook them, and out jumped the lot of Antilochus for the pole position. Eumulus drew the next slot. Then came Meriones, and after him Menelaus. Diomedes, the best man in the field, drew the last position for his horses. They took their place on the line, and Achilles showed them the turning post far off on the plain, and he posted Phoenix there, his father's comrade, to monitor the race and report the facts. They curled their whips above their horses' backs, smacked them with the reins, and with hurried yells they were off, streaking across the plain and away from the ships, dust rising up under the horses' chests like a line of thunderheads, their manes streaming in the jets of wind. The chariots sometimes rolled, sometimes hurtled over the ground, and the drivers stood in them with their hearts pounding for victory, calling to their horses, who flew along in the dust. It was when they were racing down the final stretch back toward the gray sea that the men showed their valor and the horses extended themselves. Eumulus's mares jumped into the lead, with Diomedes's stallions not far behind. So close, in fact, they seemed to mount Eumulus's chariot, and their breath was warm on his shoulders and back. their heads inches behind. Diomedes would have passed him, or drawn up even, had not Apollo become peeved with Tydeus' son, and knocked the shining lash from his hands. Diomedes' eyes filled with angry tears when he saw the mares pick up their speed and his own horses hampered, running without a goad. But Athena saw Apollo cheat Diomedes, and swooped up behind the Greek commander, returned his lash, and strengthened his horses. Then the angry goddess went after Eumulus, and broke his horse's yoke. The mares swerved off course, and the pole slipped to the ground. Eumulus rolled from the car alongside one wheel, skinning his elbows, mouth, and nose, and bruising his forehead above his eyebrows. His eyes filled with tears, and his voice choked. Diomedes steered his horses aside and drove on, shooting out far ahead of the rest, for Athena bolstered his horses and gave him the power. Fair-haired Menelaus was in second behind him. Then Antilochus called to his father's horses. "Get in there, you two, and give it all that you have. Don't worry about catching those horses up there that Diomedes is driving. Athena has speeded them up and given him glory. But you'd better catch Menelaus' horses, and quickly, or be shamed by Aethe, a mare. Why are you studs being left behind? I'll tell you something you can count on, though. Lord Nestor won't put up with you two. He'll kill you with a cold steel in a heartbeat if you pull in a cheap prize through lack of effort. So get on it. Pour on all the speed you have, and I'll take care of the rest. Find a spot where we can slip past them on the narrow road." The horses were frightened by their master's rebuke, and ran faster for a short time. Antilochus, who was a real fighter, saw that the course narrowed into a gully just ahead, where the winter torrents had washed out the road. Menelaus drove in so that their wheels wouldn't touch, but Antilochus drove off parallel to the road and gave chase. Menelaus was afraid and shouted over to him. "Antilochus, you're driving recklessly. Rein in. You can pass up ahead where the road gets wider. You'll wreck us both if you graze my car." But Antilochus drove even harder, plying the lash as if he hadn't heard. They kept on this way about the distance a discus flies after a good hard throw. But then Menelaus reined in his mares, afraid that the horses would tangle their hooves, overturn their rigs, and send them sprawling into the dust as they strained for victory. He had some angry words for Antilochus. "Out of my way, you malicious brat! To think we gave you credit for good sense, but you'll get no prize without going on oath." Then he called to his horses. "Don't hold back and stand around grieving. Their feet and knees will tire before yours. It's been a long time since those horses were young." Frightened by their master's rebuke, the horses picked up the pace and soon closed the gap. The assembled spectators watched as the horses flew across the plain in a cloud of dust. The first to spot them was Idomeneus, the Cretan commander, who had taken a seat on a lookout point apart from the crowd. When he heard Menelaus shout in the distance, he knew who it was, and he could make out a horse with distinct markings leading the race. Bay all over, with a white moon on its forehead. He stood up and announced to the crowd, "Friends, Argive commanders and rulers, am I the only one, or do you see them too? We've got 2 new horses in the lead now, a new charioteer. The mares that were in front on the way out must have gotten into trouble somewhere on the plain. I saw them swing into the turn first, but now I can't see them anywhere at all, on the Trojan plain. Maybe the reins slipped, and he lost control coming out of the turn. That must be it. He must have crashed there, and the mares must have run off the course, wild with terror. Stand up and have a look. I'm not sure, but the driver seems to be an Aetolian, which would make him no other than the son of Tydeus, breaker of horses, tough Diomedes. Oelian Ajax gave him a hard time. Do you always have to mouth off, Idomeneus? They're still galloping way the hell out there. You're not so young that your eyesight is perfect, but you have the biggest mouth, which you shouldn't let flap in the presence of your betters. The same mares are in the lead as were before, Eumulus's, and he's in the car holding the reins. Angry now, the Cretan commander answered, You're big on insults, Ajax, but short on brains, and stubborn, which is why you're such a loser. Why don't we bet something, a tripod or cauldron, and have Agamemnon decide for us which mares are out front, so you can learn by paying? He spoke, and Ajax jumped up abruptly in an ugly mood. It would have gone further, had not Achilles himself stood up and said, Let's break it up, Ajax and Idomeneus. It's unseemly. If you heard someone else arguing with language like this, you would be outraged. No, sit down now and watch for the horses. They'll be in the home stretch soon, running to win. And then each man can see for himself which horses are in first place and which in second. He had just said this when Diomedes was almost upon them, pushing hard, laying on the lash for all he was worth. His horses leapt high as they ate up the road, kicking flakes of dust back onto their driver. And the chariot, plated with gold and tin, rolled on behind the swift-footed horses, their wheels barely tracing a track in the light dust as the team flew on. Diomedes stopped in the middle of the crowd, sweat pouring from his horses' necks and chests, and he leapt down from his gleaming chariot and leaned against the lash, against the yoke. Sthenelus lost no time in collecting the prize for him and delivering to his proud comrades the woman and the eared tripod. Then he unyoked the horses. Antilochus pulled in next, taking second place from Menelaus, with tactics rather than speed. Even so, Menelaus was close behind. A horse pulling a chariot across a plain can be so close to the wheel that its tail scrapes the rim with its hindmost hairs. Menelaus was that close behind Antilochus. Although he had been a discus throw behind, he made up ground quickly when Aethe, Agamemnon's pretty mare, began to feel her mettle, and had the course been longer, he would have passed Antilochus without any question. Meriones, Idomeneus' lieutenant, was a spear cast behind. His horses were the slowest, and he was the least skillful driver. Last of all came the son of Admetus, dragging his chariot and driving his horses along. Achilles, the great sprinter, felt sorry for him, and he addressed the crowd with winged words. Look, the best man is coming in last. He should get a prize, the prize for second. But let Tydeus' son take first prize. Everyone agreed, and he would have given the mare to Eumulus, for he had their approval. But Antilochus, son of great-souled Nestor, registered this complaint with Achilles. I will be really angry with you, Achilles, if you do what you say you're going to. Rob me of my prize, on the grounds that Eumulus had an accident with his horses and chariot, good as he is. He should have prayed to the immortals, and he wouldn't have lost. But if you like him so much and feel so bad for him, you have enough gold and bronze in your huts, and sheep and women and solid-hooved horses, to give him an even better prize later, or do it right now so the Greeks can applaud you. But I'm not giving up the mare. Anybody who wants to is welcome to fight me for her." And swift-footed, godlike Achilles smiled. He liked Antilochus, and was glad for him, and the onshore breeze carried his answer. "Antilochus, if you want me to give Eumulus something else from my hut, I will do so. I'll give him the corselet I took from Asteropaeus. It is bronze, plated with circles of bright tin, and something he will value." He asked Automedon to bring it from the hut, and he went and brought it, and placed it in Eumulus's hands, who received it gratefully. Then uprose Menelaus, troubled at heart, and furious with Antilochus. A herald put the staff in his hands, and asked for silence. Then the godlike man began to speak. "Antilochus, you have shown good sense in the past, but look at what you have done now. You shamed my valor when you fouled my horses, and forced yours in front, though they were not as good. Come now, Argive commanders and counselors, and judge between us without any bias, so that no Achaean man at arms can say, 'Menelaus beat out Antilochus with lies and went off with the mare. His horses were worse by a long shot, but he had more clout.' Here's my judgment, and I don't think anyone will reproach me for it, because it will be just. Antilochus, come here, prince, and as is the custom, stand before your horses and chariot. Hold in the hand the slender lash you drove with, and touching your horses, swear to the Earthshaker that you didn't deliberately block my chariot." And Antilochus very sensibly replied, "Bear with me now. I am much younger than you, Lord Menelaus, and you are the elder and the better man, and familiar with the transgressions of youth, our impulsive notions and light-headed thoughts. So please, be tolerant. The mule that I won I will give to you, and if you should demand something even better that I have in my house, I would rather give it to you, my prince, than fall out of your good graces all of my days, and become a sinner in the eyes of the gods." Thus Nestor's son, and he led up the mare and gave it to Menelaus, whose heart warmed like morning dew on full ears of wheat, when the sun ripens the bristling crop. Yes, Menelaus, your heart warmed, and your words went to him on wings. "Antilochus, I accept your apology, although I am angry, for never before have you been out of line or malicious. This time your youth got the better of you. Just don't try to outsmart your betters again. There are very few men in this army who could have won me over like that. But you have gone through a lot for my sake, as have your brave father and brother. So I not only accept your apology, but I will give you the mare, which is mine by rights, to the end that everyone here may know that my heart is not overbearing or hard." And he gave the mare to Noemon, Antilochus's comrade, and took for himself the shining cauldron. Meriones took the 2 talents of gold for 4th place, which was where he finished. But the 5th prize, the 2-handled bowl, was left unclaimed. This bowl Achilles gave to Nestor, bringing it to him through the crowd, and saying, "Take this, reverend sir, as your keepsake and memorial of Patroclus's burial, for you will not see him again among the Greeks. I simply give you this prize, for you will not compete in boxing or wrestling, or enter the javelin throw, or run in the sprints. Old age is heavy upon you." Nestor took the bowl from his hands and was glad. Then he addressed Achilles with winged words. "Yes, my boy, right you are. My limbs are no longer firm, my feet, my hands, and I have no punch left in my arms. Oh, if I were young and strong again, as I was on that day when the Achaeans were burying Lord Amarynceus at Buprasium, and his sons put up prizes in his honor. Not a man there was my equal, not an Achaean, Pylian, or Aetolian hero. I outboxed Clytomedes, Enops' son, and in wrestling I threw Ancaeus of Pleuron. I beat out Iphiclus in the sprint, good as he was, and out threw Phyleus and Polydorus both in the javelin. It was only in the chariot race that the twin sons of Actor outdrove me, crowding me out, jealous for victory, because the best prizes were left for this race. They were joined at the hip. One of them drove steady as she goes, the other plied the whip. Well, that was then. I leave such exploits to younger men now, and yield as I must to grievous age. But I was the best back then. Now you bury your friend too with funeral games, and I am glad to receive this. My heart rejoices that you are always kind enough to remember me, and do not forget the honor that is my due. May the gods repay you and grant you grace." Achilles listened to all that Nestor said, then went back again through the great throng. Then he sent out prizes for the boxing match. He led in a sturdy mule and tethered her in the assembly ground, a mule of 6 years, unbroken, the hardest kind to tame. For the loser he set out a 2-handled cup. Then he rose to announce to them all, "Son of Atreus and Greek heroes all, we need 2 men for these prizes, the 2 best at trading punches. Whoever Apollo gives endurance to as the crowd looks on will lead the sturdy mule to his hut. The loser's prize will be the 2-handled cup." At this point, a real boxer stood up, Epeius, son of Panopeus, tall and well built, and laid hold of the sturdy mule, saying, "Anybody want the cup as his prize? Because no Greek alive is going to beat me in boxing and lead away the mule. I'm the best there is. Isn't it enough I come up short in war? A man can't be good at everything. But let me tell you this, and it's a sure thing. Anybody fights me, I'll bust him wide open and crush his bones. Better have his next of kin standing by to carry him out when I'm through with him." Dead silence. Only one man stood up, a godlike figure, Euryalus, whose father, Mecisteus, had once come to Thebes for the burial of Oedipus, and beaten all of the native sons in the funeral games. Diomedes badly wanted him to win, and acted as his second. He gave him a pep talk, then got him a loincloth and oxhide thongs to strap on his hands. When they were girded up, they stepped into the middle with hands held high, and were all over each other with furies of hard punches, snapping jabs to the jaw, and the sweat was flying from their arms and legs as his opponent looked for an opening. Epeius moved in and got him with an uppercut, and Euryalus' legs were no longer under him. A fish leaps out from wind-rippled shallows and is just as quickly in the black water again. Euryalus made like that when he was hit. Epeius, general soul, pulled him upright, and his friends dragged him through the crowd with feet trailing, spitting out clots of blood, head hanging to one side. They set him down, groggy, among his companions, and went off to claim the 2-handled cup. Then Peleus' son set out the prizes for the 3rd event, a grueling wrestling match. For the winner he displayed a cauldron, which the spectators guessed to be worth 12 oxen, and for the loser he put up a woman skilled in various crafts. They rated her at 4 oxen. Then he rose to announce to them all, "Will the contestants for this event please rise?" Then up rose Telamonian Ajax and wily Odysseus, who knew all the tricks. They girded themselves, stepped to the middle, and took their stance, gripping each other like crisscrossing rafters set in the gable of a high roof built to withstand the wind. Their backs creaked under the strain of their strong, intertwined arms. Sweat poured down their bodies, and bloody welts rose up on their shoulders and ribs as they struggled to win the exquisite cauldron. Odysseus couldn't trip or throw Ajax, nor Ajax Odysseus, whose strength held firm. The crowd was getting bored when Ajax said, "Odysseus, either you lift me or let me lift you, and let's leave it all up to Zeus." Ajax spoke and lifted him, but Odysseus did not forget his tricks, clipping Ajax in the back of his knee and sending him down, with Odysseus on his chest. The crowd was amazed. Then Odysseus tried to lift Ajax. He moved him a little from the ground, but couldn't get him up. But he did hook his knee around Ajax's leg, so that they went down together. Grimy with dust, they were ready to go at it a third time, but Achilles himself rose and held them back. "No need to continue and wear yourselves out. You're both winners. Take equal prizes and go your way, so others can compete." Then Peleus' son set out prizes for a sprint. He had a silver mixing bowl, highly wrought. It held 6 gallons and was the most beautiful on earth, a masterpiece of Sidonian art. Phoenician merchants had carried it over the misty sea to the harbor of Lemnos, where they gave it as a gift to Thoas. And Jason's son, Euneus, gave it as a ransom for Priam's son Lycaon to the hero Patroclus. This bowl Achilles offered as a prize to the winning sprinter in honor of his friend. For second he put up a great fattened ox, and a half-talent of gold for third. Then he stood up and announced, "Will the contestants for this event please rise?" Up rose swift Oelian Ajax, wily Odysseus, and Nestor's son Antilochus, the fastest of all the army's young men. They lined up. Achilles showed them the finish line, and they were off, running flat out from the pole, with Ajax moving quickly into the lead, and Odysseus following close behind. A woman, weaving, pulls the shed rod back close to her breast and holds it there, while she spools the weft through. That's how close Odysseus was. His feet landed in Ajax's tracks before the dust had settled, and his breath beat down on Ajax's head as he sped on. The crowd was screaming for Odysseus to win and kept cheering him on. When they reached the final stretch, Odysseus said a silent prayer to gray-eyed Athena. "Hear me, goddess, and don't fail my feet now!" Pallas Athena heard his prayer, and made his feet and hands light. But when they were about to make their final spurt, Ajax slipped as he ran, Athena's doing, in the dung that was left from all the bulls Achilles had sacrificed in Patroclus' honor. Odysseus, finishing first, collected the bowl, and glorious Ajax, spewing out dung from his nostrils and mouth, took the ox. With his hands on one horn, he addressed the crowd. Shit! The goddess tripped me up. It's like she's Odysseus' mother, always at his side. They all had a good laugh at his expense. Then Antilochus took off the last prize, smiling, and addressed the crowd. As you all well know, the gods to this day still honor the older generation of men. Ajax is just a little older than I am, but Odysseus belongs to an older generation. Old, but still with plenty of juice, as they say of him, and tough to outrun, except for Achilles. Thus Antilochus paying a compliment to the great sprinter Achilles, who answered, Antilochus, your praise will not go unrewarded. I will add a half-talent of gold to your prize. Antilochus received it gladly from his hands. Then Peleus' son brought onto the field a long-shadowed spear, a shield, and a helmet, gear that Patroclus had stripped from Sarpedon, and he announced to the crowd, We invite 2 men to compete for these prizes, 2 good men who will fight in full armor before the crowd, with bronze, sharp to the touch. The first man to reach the other man's skin, pierce the armor and draw blood, is the winner, and gets as his prize this silver-studded sword, good Thracian work, I took from Asteropaeus. The 2 will hold Sarpedon's arms in command, and we will feast them both well in our quarters. He spoke, and up rose huge Telamonian Ajax, and Tydeus' son, tough Diomedes. They armed themselves on opposite sides of the crowd, then stepped into the middle, eager to fight, a cold light in their eyes. The crowd was spellbound. 3 times they lunged at each other, and the 3rd time Ajax hit the disc of his opponent's shield, but did not get through to his corsleted skin. Diomedes kept trying to get his spear over Ajax's shield and touch his neck with the point. The crowd feared for Ajax and wanted them to stop and take equal prizes. But Achilles gave the sword to Diomedes with its scabbard and belt. Then Peleus' son set out a rough lump of iron that mighty Eetion once used to hurl. When brilliant, swift-footed Achilles killed him, he took it to his ship with his other possessions. Now he rose and announced to the crowd, Will the contestants for this event please rise? The winner here will have enough iron to last his shepherd and plowman 5 full years, and not have to send them to town to buy more. Then uprose the battler Polypoetes, along with Leonteus, strong and godlike, Telamonian Ajax, and resplendent Epeius. They lined up, and Epeius went first, whirling around with the lump of iron and heaving it out. The crowd laughed at his throw. Leonteus went second, and then big Ajax, whose throw went farther than the other marks. But when Polypoetes heaved the iron, he sent it sailing over the heads of the crowd like a cowhand's bolus over a herd of cattle. The crowd roared, and Polypoetes' men carried the prize to their strong king's ship. Then Achilles set out iron for the archers, 10 double axe heads, and 10 single with a violet sheen, and he set up the mast of a tarred ship far off in the sand, and attached to the top a fine cord, tied onto the foot of a quivering dove. He told them this was their target. Whoever hits the fluttering dove will take home the double axes. Hitting the cord but not the bird gets second place, and the single axes. Then uprose Lord Teucer in his might, and Meriones, Idomeneus' comrade. They put their lots in a bronze helmet and shook it. Teucer drew first place. He let fly an arrow, a strong shot, but he failed to vow to the archer a sacrifice of 100 firstling lambs. So he missed the bird. Apollo grudged him that, but he hit the cord close to where it was tied to the bird's foot, and the keen edge severed it. The dove soared up to the sky as the cord sagged down to earth. Meriones grabbed the bow from Teucer. He had been holding an arrow while Teucer aimed, and vowed a sacrifice of 100 firstling lambs to the archer. He spotted the dove fluttering overhead beneath the clouds, and as she circled there, he hit her smack beneath the wing. The arrow passed clean through, and falling down, stuck in the ground before Meriones' foot. The dove landed on the mast. She hung her head, and her plumage drooped. Her life flitted away, and she dropped to the earth. The spectators were lost in wonder and could not believe their eyes. Meriones scooped up all the 10 double axe heads, and Teucer took the singles to his hollow ship. Then Peleus' son brought out a long-shadowed spear, and an unfired cauldron worth an ox, embossed with flowers. The javelin throwers rose, Atreus' son, the warlord Agamemnon, and Meriones, Idomeneus' comrade. But Achilles, swift and godlike, addressed them. Son of Atreus, we recognize your power and know you are the best at throwing spears. Take the prize and return to your hollow ships. But we will give the spear to Meriones with your consent. At least that's how I want it. The warlord did not disagree. He gave the bronze spear to Meriones, then handed to his herald Talthybius the beautiful prize.